So the third tradition is called the cybernetic tradition. And really, the best way to understand this is they're looking at information processing or information systems. The word cybernetic kind of sounds like you're going to be combining humans and robots, but that's not really, unfortunately, that's not what it's about. I kind of wish it was about that. It'd be amazing. But this area is primarily interested in how systems and networks of communication function through the transfer of information to remain stable over time. So we're not talking about causes and effects. We're not talking about individual people. We're talking about systems and networks. And so this current generation is very familiar with networking. You're networked in your social media, and you understand that people have a system of relationships. For example, on Facebook, you might have certain friends in common that overlap. Well, that's interesting. Maybe you've even found it interesting where you might have a couple hundred friends, someone else has a couple hundred friends, and then every once in a while, Facebook will suggest somebody, hey, do you want to be friends with this person? And they have like 50 similar friendships that you do, and you're like, I have never met this person. How is it that we know 50 of the same people and have never even heard of them? I mean, that's kind of interesting in and of itself. This approach conceives communication problems as breakdowns in the flow of information, resulting from things like noise or information overload, etc. So perhaps you've been sitting in a course, maybe a 3-hour course. I took a history course as an undergrad, the first ever night class, the first ever basically 3-hour class. I think it might have been 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I remember thinking, hey, this is perfect. I go once a week. This is going to be great. What I didn't realize is that listening to somebody lecture, and it ended up being almost all lecture to us about history at night for almost 3 hours was information overload. I just could not take the amount of information. And after the first hour or so, it was just noise. It was just, I couldn't process it. My brain was full, as some people have said. And so I found that was very difficult, and I had to drop the class. And then I started taking that class more than one day a week for a little bit, less time, maybe 2 days a week, I think it was. And so that shortened it. So then I didn't have information overload. I had a little break, and then I went to a class after the break, and just that little break, maybe a lunch in between, really helped. And you may have experienced that as well. You all do this with your gadgets. You might have your email goes to your phone, and everything's on your phone. And so then you think, oh my gosh, this thing is bothering me. I've got to concentrate. And you control that flow of information. You manage the information flow so that you might turn the thing off or just stow it and ignore or put it on silent so you don't have to deal with it. And so what you're trying to do is manage the information processing that's going on in your personal communication system, in your, you and your phone and the other people around you. You all do this too sometimes when it really matters that you study. You might isolate yourself and so you reduce all your distractions. This is all systems thinking. This is the way systems people think. This approach stresses feedback and the reliability of the information being processed for system maintenance. So you may have experienced, for example, a time where you were at the library in the computer room and you notice, or maybe in your apartment or the dorms, and you notice that, wow, the internet on my computer is really running slow. And so you might check to see if the system is reliable. Is information being processed right now reliably? And so you ask the person next to you or your roommate, hey, are you having trouble with the internet? And they might say, no, mine's working fine. And then you eliminate that as a possibility and you say, okay, well, maybe it's my computer. So then you maybe close a couple of applications and look for a solution that helps that information processing remain stable over time. So cybernetic tradition is really all about that, the flow of information going back and forth. It's almost always called information. Sometimes it's communication, but a lot of times they call it information and information processing especially. And certainly the word systems is going to be there throughout. Just because you hear something that sounds like system, however, doesn't mean it's instantly in the cybernetic tradition. That's a word that is used in different ways. So don't get fooled just because maybe you see somewhere else the word system. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be in the cybernetic tradition just because that word came up. This approach also focuses on the systemic, complex, and unpredictable nature of communication and networks of communication. So you don't exactly know how things will work. This is really common in the world of organizational communication. A lot of times people in that area use systems theory or a cybernetic approach as a basic platform through which they understand whatever it is they're looking at in the organization. And so a lot of times they stress, the world of organizations is very unpredictable. The economy changes, your competition changes, people you hire and fire changes. Sometimes, when you're hiring people, there's a lot of good applicants and you get to choose among strong people, strong candidates. And other times you have an opening and you don't have any good applicants. And so things are unpredictable. You never know quite how things are going to go in the world of organizations. Organizations are a system. However, it's not just organizations and groups. Even our brains, from this cybernetic perspective, are seen as a system. The distinction between mind and matter is like that between software and hardware. Thought is nothing more than information processing. So you all bought phones or computers, and maybe you didn't have all that much software on it. So you bought some apps or you downloaded some things, and that helps you do the things you want to do with your computer. Well, that's the same way that cybernetic researchers think of the individual person. They think of your brain as an information processor. So you have a brain, which is like the computer, and then you need software applications, which is your thoughts, and how you process information is really seen as a system. Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, I was just thinking about something. And other people say, I was having a conversation in my head. And they think, well, conversation in your head is really just thinking. In fact, there's a term called intrapersonal communication. That's I-N-T-R-A, intrapersonal communication, which basically just means communication with yourself. And when I heard that term, I thought, well, don't they just mean thinking? I thought, why do we need this extra term? Well, that idea is coming from this cybernetic tradition, this mindset where they see everything as a system that's processing information. So your brain is not about you being a person. It's like a little computer. And obviously computers process information, so does your brain. So it's communication within yourself. That's a strange way to think about it, but that's one of the examples. And so this approach rejects simplistic, linear cause-effect thinking about communication. That's the sociopsychological tradition talking there. They say, no, it's all things are connected, all things are interconnected rather, and they're all networked. So you can't change one thing without it affecting the other things. So the sociopsychological area of research that we just talked about is about isolating variables and trying to break things down to the simplest parts to understand them. This approach, however, is about how everything is interconnected and networked, and so they're very different in that way. The fourth area of research is sociocultural, and the word cultural there is really the main part of this, and that is that our culture is shaped by communication. So this approach looks at how our understandings, our meanings, norms, and roles, and rules, and we'll put rules in quotes because they don't mean necessarily official rules. They mean that more generally, like the rules of society. And those are all formed and worked out interactively. So they look at how communication is shaping our world. It looks at mostly dyads and groups. A dyad is two people, like a doctor and a patient, as shown in the picture. And obviously a group is more than that, maybe between 3 and 12 or 3 and 20, depending upon what research you look at. So this approach, sociocultural approach, sees that situated communication produces a larger social order and society that then shapes the in-the-moment communication. So if you looked at all the separate little conversations happening between doctors and patients, for example, you would see, oh, looks like the physicians really have control over things and they're running the show, and the patient just listens to that advice and basically accepts it. And even if they disagree, they might not say it. And then those individual interactions over time accumulate and form a norm about the way patients are supposed to interact with physicians. So those in-the-moment communication interactions shape the larger societal norms, and then that societal norm shapes future interactions. So once you go into maybe as a child you went into the doctor's office and your parents might have even prepared you for that interaction. They said, "Oh, we're going to the doctor and they're going to, poke you and they're going to weigh you and put a cold stethoscope on your skin." But it's very important. And, our parents end up talking to physicians with a lot of respect when we're young, and we see that. And then we internalize that, and that becomes a norm for us, and then we continue to do that even as adults. And I have this example of doctor-patient interaction because it's one of the most common areas studied in the sociocultural tradition. There have been a lot of videotaped encounters between doctors and patients, and a lot of norms show up on these videos, and it's kind of fascinating how physicians maintain control over the interaction. For example, one of the ways they do it is by asking almost exclusively yes or no questions. And so the patients answer yes or no, and sometimes they don't really ask about the details and they're trying to move on to their next appointment. Someone's sitting in the dressing room. And the amazing part is that patients largely accept this social situation, this social order. Yeah, the doctor's in charge. I mean, how long have you waited in a doctor's waiting room before you're called in? And then you get called into the examination room, and then you wait a little longer, right? And you don't complain about it, probably. Some people might complain, but most people don't complain. They just accept it. I mean, would you put up with this in any other situation? How long, if you came to a lecture and the professor wasn't there, would you wait 45 minutes or an hour? You'd be gone, right? You'd be gone after 10 minutes. You'd say, forget it. Lion's not coming. Well, I'm out of here. That's his problem now. But in a doctor-patient situation, we just feel like we need to accept that power dynamic, and that is a social norm. I don't follow those norms, by the way. I have often walked out of the examination room to go look for the doctor. I say often. I've probably done it 2, maybe 3 times in my whole adult life. And only when the wait is really extended. So let's say I've been in the waiting room and then the examination room, and it's 45 minutes or an hour. Then I get up and I go look. I remember one time I got out of the examination room and I started looking around for the doctor, and everybody started flipping out like I had broken the law. They were like, "Whoa, the patients are leaving the rooms," and they were like, I was like, what are they going to do? Give me a tranquilizer and restrain me or something? All I was doing, I'm a human being, my goodness. All I did was leave a room that I was alone in for about 45 minutes. So is that bad, really? And it turned out that the physician was leaning up against the nurse's station, basically just chatting. It looked like to me, just chatting. They're laughing, all relaxed. And I'm thinking, oh, I know what's going on. That I'm breaking the social order down here. This person wants to be in charge of his or her time, and they don't like it when I don't accept that reality. Now, is this going through their heads? Probably not. But I have done that on occasion, and it really rattles them. So communication is viewed as the process that produces or reproduces or repairs or even transforms society. So in my little moment of revolution there, where I walked out of the examination room after 45 minutes that I gave you there, it's, am I transforming society? Well, probably not. But I do know that physicians have become much more concerned with how long their patients wait, because if enough people complain and enough people walk out of the examination room, they're going to start changing things. So communication is one of the ways that society is established, and it's one of the ways that it changes. This approach is really interested in how what we call macro level society is created and sustained or transformed in those micro level interactions or micro level processes. So what freedom do we really have in the moment to fight against those big macro, meaning large level, big level norms? What freedom do you have to fight against those in the moment, in the micro moment? Like the teacher here, teacher-student relationships are also pretty fascinating if you think about it. Here's the teacher, and he's saying, I expect you all to be independent innovative, critical thinkers who do exactly as I say. And here's the teacher standing up, and the students are all sitting down, and they're writing down probably everything he says. And that's a weird dynamic in itself. I mean, we all want to learn, go to school, and, become more intelligent and more employable and be able to solve our problems. But it is an interesting dynamic that there are a lot of norms built into the teacher-student relationship. Like you have to raise your hand oftentimes when you speak, and the teacher doesn't have to raise his or her hand, right? Or you have to account for yourself. Like ask if you can go to the bathroom. People say, "Can I go to the bathroom?" And I'm always a little shocked that people ask that question because I don't ask that. I don't ask anyone if I can go to the bathroom anymore. I mean, but I guess not long ago when I was in school, I did, and so my answer is the same all the time. They say, "Can I go to the bathroom?" And I normally reply just as a little bit of a joke. I say, "This is America. You can go wherever you want. Like what's stopping you?" But see, what's going on here is that we feel the pressure of societal norms that will shape our interaction, that we will feel constraints that no one ever has to say, and yet they're there because you feel like you shouldn't go against that. And so the question that a lot of sociocultural researchers ask is, how much does culture and society shape our choices in the moment? So how much freedom do you really have in the moment of conversation to act in a different way? Or how much do you have to go with the flow? And that's, I think, a fascinating topic. Gender is another great example. Sometimes we feel gender norms, and so I shouldn't be the one to speak because I'm a girl. Or in another context, I might not want to talk because I'm the guy. And those things are present in almost every interaction where we feel those larger macro level society pressures influencing our choices in the moment.